Lucas Montgomery's phone buzzed for the fifth time in 3 minutes, but for once in his life, he didn't care. The acquisition paperwork could wait. The board members could wait. The entire Montgomery real estate empire could wait, all because of the way she laughed. The morning had begun like any other Tuesday. Lucas arrived at Brood Awakening at precisely 7:45 a.m., briefcase in one hand, his personal assistant's meticulous notes in the other. He had 2 hours to review the final details of the Westbrook Hotel acquisition before meeting with his executive team. It was a $380 million deal that would cement his company's dominance in the luxury hospitality market across the eastern seaboard. The coffee shop was busier than usual. Lucas scanned the room, irritated to find his regular corner table occupied by a college student surrounded by textbooks. With a resigned sigh, he settled for the last available seat at a small table by the window where a woman was already sitting. "Do you mind if I join you?" Lucas asked, his tone clipped and professional. "Everywhere else is full." She looked up from her book, and something in Lucas's meticulously organized world tilted off its axis. Her eyes were a warm amber that caught the morning light, and when she smiled, genuinely smiled, not the practiced social graces he'd grown accustomed to. Tiny crinkles formed at the corners of her eyes. "Not at all," she replied, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please." Lucas sat down, grateful that she immediately returned to her book. Good. He needed to concentrate. The Westbrook deal had been in motion for 18 months, and today's meeting would finalize the terms before tomorrow's signing. He pulled out his laptop, opened the property valuation spreadsheets, and tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting to his table companion. She was completely absorbed in her novel, occasionally tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. Once she laughed softly at something she read, a sound so genuine it made Lucas glance up from his screen. "Sorry," she said, catching his eye. "This author is just brilliant with dialogue." Lucas should have nodded politely and returned to work. Instead, he heard himself ask, "What are you reading?" She held up the book, a contemporary novel he'd never heard of. It's about a woman who inherits an old bookstore and discovers letters hidden in the walls from the 1940s. Her enthusiasm was palpable. "I'm Claire, by the way, Claire Goodwin." "Lucas Montgomery," he replied automatically, offering his hand. When she shook it, he noticed her grip was firm and confident. "Nice to meet you, Lucas. Are you working on something important?" She nodded toward his laptop, "Just finalizing some business." The words came out more curtly than he'd intended, a reflexive shield against distraction. But Claire only smiled again, that same genuine smile, and said, "Well, don't let me interrupt." Then she glanced at his untouched coffee. "Though you might want to drink that before it gets cold." Lucas took a sip, surprised to find himself smiling back. "Thanks for the reminder." He turned back to his spreadsheets, but the numbers refused to hold his attention. Claire occasionally turned pages, completely engrossed in her story, seemingly content with the silence between them. It was refreshing. Most people who recognized him immediately launched into business proposals or name-dropped mutual acquaintances. His phone buzzed again. His assistant reminding him that he had 90 minutes until the executive meeting. Lucas glanced at Claire, who was now making notes in the margins of her book. "Are you a literature professor?" he asked before he could stop himself. Claire looked up, surprised. "Close, I'm a children's book editor at Peregrine Publishing, but I read everything." She tilted her head. "What about you? What do you do when you're not staring at spreadsheets with such intensity?" Lucas hesitated. Usually, when he revealed his identity as the CEO of Montgomery Real Estate, people's demeanor changed instantly. But something made him want to delay that inevitable shift with Claire. "I work in property development," he said vaguely. "That explains the suit at 8 a.m., Claire said with a grin, "though it's a very nice suit." Lucas felt a warmth creep up his neck. Was he actually blushing? He couldn't remember the last time he'd blushed. "Thank you." "Most days I'd rather be in jeans." "So why aren't you?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "Because I have an important meeting in," he checked his watch. 86 minutes. "Important enough that you haven't touched your coffee again," Claire observed. Must be quite the development. Lucas glanced at his screen at the Westbrook Hotel's projected revenue figures. He'd been working toward this acquisition for over a year, and now he was struggling to care. It's a historic hotel chain, very prestigious. Sounds impressive, Claire said, but there was no particular awe in her voice, just polite interest. Is it something you're passionate about? Lucas opened his mouth to give his standard response about market opportunities and strategic growth, then closed it. When was the last time someone had asked him about passion rather than profit margins? I used to be, he admitted. When I first started in real estate, I was excited about restoring historic buildings, preserving their character while making them functional for modern use. He shook his head slightly. These days, it's more about adding zeros to the company valuation, Claire nodded thoughtfully. That happens to a lot of people. We start with dreams and end up with spreadsheets. She closed her book. What would you do if you could go back to those early days? What kind of project would excite you now? Lucas had never considered the question. His path had seemed inevitable: take over the family business, expand it, succeed. But as he looked at Claire's genuinely curious expression, he found himself answering honestly. I'd focus on mixed-use developments that combine affordable housing with community spaces. Libraries, art studios, gardens. The ideas flowed surprisingly easily. In my first year out of business school, I drafted plans for a development that would transform abandoned warehouses into living and working spaces for artists. My father shot it down immediately. That sounds incredible, Claire said, leaning forward. Why did he shoot it down? Not profitable enough. Montgomery real estate has a certain image to maintain. Lucas was surprised by the bitterness in his voice. Claire's eyes were thoughtful. And now you're in charge, right? Lucas blinked. How did you, the way you talk about it, the suit? The fact that you look like someone accustomed to making decisions. She shrugged. Just an educated guess. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his assistant. Lucas ignored it. Yes, he admitted. I've been CEO for 3 years. Then maybe you get to decide what image to maintain now, Claire suggested. Her voice was gentle, but her words landed with unexpected weight. Lucas was saved from responding when the barista called out, Claire, your almond croissant is ready. Excuse me, Claire said, standing up. Can I get you anything while I'm up there? No, thank you, Lucas replied automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, yes, another black coffee would be great. As Claire walked to the counter, Lucas watched her interact with the barista, laughing at something the young woman said, then complimenting her earrings. Every interaction seemed genuine, unhurried despite the busy coffee shop. Lucas's phone rang. His executive vice president, no doubt wondering why Lucas hadn't responded to any messages. He silenced it without looking. When Claire returned with his coffee and her pastry, Lucas made a decision. Would you have dinner with me tonight? The words were out before he could analyze them, before he could consider his schedule or the implications. Claire looked surprised, then smiled that same smile that had first caught his attention. That's very direct, she said, sitting down. We've only just met. I know, Lucas acknowledged. But I'd like to continue our conversation somewhere without deadlines or interruptions. Claire studied him for a moment. All right, Lucas Montgomery, I'll have dinner with you on one condition. Name it. You have to wear jeans. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Lucas laughed, the sound unfamiliar even to his own ears. Deal. They exchanged numbers, and Lucas found himself sharing details about his favorite restaurants, asking about Claire's preferences. His phone continued to buzz, but each notification seemed less important than learning that Claire loved Thai food but was allergic to shellfish, that she had moved to the city 5 years ago from a small town in Vermont, that she volunteered reading to children at the public library on weekends. It wasn't until he glanced at his watch that Lucas realized with a shock that it was 9:30. His meeting had started 15 minutes ago. I have to go, he said abruptly, gathering his papers and closing his laptop. I'm late for my meeting, Claire's expression showed concern, the important one. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to make you late. You didn't, Lucas assured her, surprised to find he meant it. This was enlightening. As he rushed out of the coffee shop, Lucas called his assistant, reschedule the executive meeting for tomorrow morning. And cancel my dinner with the Westbrook representatives tonight. Something more important came up. That evening, Lucas changed into jeans and a casual button-down shirt for the first time in months. He met Claire at a small Thai restaurant she had suggested, tucked away in a neighborhood he rarely visited despite owning 3 buildings on the same street. When he arrived, Claire was already seated at a table by the window, her face lighting up when she spotted him. She wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes appear even warmer than he remembered. "You kept your promise," she said, gesturing to his jeans as he sat down. "I wasn't sure you actually owned a pair." "I have a whole drawer full," Lucas admitted. "They just don't get much use these days." "Well, they look good on you, much more relaxed than the power suit from this morning." She picked up her menu. "The owner makes the best pad see you in the city, just so you know." "I'll trust your recommendation," Lucas said, closing his menu without looking at it. As they ordered and waited for their food, conversation flowed with surprising ease. Claire told him about growing up in a small Vermont town where her parents ran the local hardware store. "My favorite place as a kid was the public library," she said. "It was tiny, just 2 rooms, but the librarian, Mrs. Peabody, saved all the new children's books for me to read first. I guess that's where my career began." "How did you end up in publishing?" Lucas asked, genuinely curious. "English major, then a publishing internship that turned into an assistant job, then junior editor." She smiled. "I just worked my way up, book by book." "Do you enjoy it?" "Most days," Claire said thoughtfully. "When I find a manuscript that makes me laugh out loud on the subway, or cry in my apartment at 2 a.m., or think about the characters for weeks afterward, those moments make everything worth it." She took a sip of her Thai iced tea. "What about you? How did you end up in real estate?" Lucas sighed. "Less choice involved. The Montgomery name has been on real estate developments for 3 generations. My father had my career mapped out before I could walk." "And if you hadn't followed that map?" Claire asked. Lucas had never seriously considered an alternative. "Architecture, maybe." "I always loved the design aspect of development, or restoration, bringing historic buildings back to life." He paused. "No one's asked me that question in a very long time." "People should ask more questions," Claire said simply. "It's how we discover what matters." Their food arrived, and Lucas found himself sharing more about his life than he had with anyone in years: his strained relationship with his father, the pressure of taking over the family business, his growing disconnection from the work he once loved. "What happened with your meeting today?" Claire asked as they shared mango sticky rice for dessert. "I rescheduled it," Lucas admitted. "And I postponed a dinner with the hotel chain representatives." Claire's eyes widened. "Lucas, that was your big acquisition, the one you've been working on for months. You shouldn't have done that." "It's fine," Lucas said, surprised to find he meant it. "The deal will still be there tomorrow." "But won't they be upset? Won't it affect negotiations?" Lucas smiled slightly. "There are benefits to being the one with the checkbook." "They're more worried about me walking away than I am about them finding another buyer." Claire shook her head. "Your world is very different from mine. In publishing, we're constantly chasing authors, convincing them to choose us over other houses." "What makes an author choose one publisher over another?" Lucas asked. "Connection," Claire said immediately. "Trust, believing we understand their vision and will fight for their book." She smiled. "Not unlike what I imagine your hotel owners want, someone who understands the value of what they've built." Lucas considered this. "I used to approach acquisitions that way, looking for properties with potential that others missed, creating something that honored the original vision while making it viable for the future." He sighed. "Somewhere along the way, it became more about the numbers and less about the buildings themselves." "It's not too late to change that approach," Claire said quietly. Their conversation continued as they left the restaurant, neither ready for the evening to end. Lucas suggested a walk, and they strolled through a nearby park, talking about books Claire had edited, buildings Lucas had developed, places they'd both traveled. "I can't remember the last time I talked this much," Lucas admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. or enjoyed a conversation this much. Me either, Claire said, her voice soft. It's surprisingly easy to talk to you, Lucas Montgomery, even though I'm a corporate real estate tycoon, he asked with a self-deprecating smile. You're more than your job title, Claire said, looking directly at him. Though I admit, when you first sat down this morning with your expensive suit and serious expression, I didn't expect this. What did you expect? Someone more concerned with his phone than the person across from him. She smiled. Someone who wouldn't notice that I was reading a book, let alone ask about it. Lucas was silent for a moment. I almost was that person, if you hadn't smiled the way you did. The way I did, like you meant it, Lucas said simply. Like you were genuinely happy about whatever you were reading, it was. He searched for the right word, real. Claire's expression softened. Well, I'm glad my genuine enjoyment of Chapter 7 derailed your morning. So am I, Lucas said. Without thinking, he reached over and took her hand. Her fingers curled naturally around his, warm and reassuring. They stayed like that for several minutes, watching the moonlight reflect on the pond's surface before Lucas reluctantly noted the time. It's getting late. Can I walk you home? Claire nodded, and they made their way to her apartment building, a pre-war brownstone on a tree-lined street. At her door, Lucas felt suddenly nervous, like a teenager after a first date. I'd like to see you again, he said. Maybe this weekend. I could show you some of my favorite historic buildings in the city. Claire's smile was answer enough, but she added, I'd like that very much. Lucas leaned down and kissed her gently, a brief touch of his lips to hers that somehow felt more significant than any relationship he'd had in years. Good night, Claire. Good night, Lucas. Thank you for wearing jeans. As Lucas walked back to his penthouse apartment, he felt lighter than he had in years. His phone had dozens of notifications, emails about the Westbrook deal, messages from his executive team, a missed call from his father. For once, none of it seemed urgent. The next morning, Lucas arrived at Brood Awakening at 7:45 a.m., ordered his usual black coffee, and took the same table by the window. This time, he wasn't reviewing acquisition paperwork. Instead, he was reading a book, the same one Claire had been reading when they met. He had downloaded it to his tablet the night before and stayed up until 2 a.m. reading. At 8:15, the chair across from him pulled out and he looked up to find Claire standing there, surprise and pleasure lighting up her face. Is this seat taken? She asked, echoing his words from the day before. It is now, Lucas replied, closing his tablet. I'm reading your book. And? What do you think of it? The dialogue is brilliant, he admitted. I couldn't put it down. Claire's smile was worth every bleary-eyed moment of his morning. I knew you had good taste. They fell into easy conversation as Claire ordered her coffee and pastry. When Lucas's phone rang with his assistant's number, he silenced it without a second thought. Don't you have an important meeting today? Claire asked, noticing the gesture. I do, Lucas acknowledged, but I'm reconsidering some aspects of the deal. Claire tilted her head questioningly. You asked me yesterday what would excite me now, Lucas explained. I've been thinking about that all night. The Westbrook chain includes some beautiful historic properties that have been poorly maintained. What if, instead of turning them all into luxury hotels, we restored some to their original glory and repurposed them as mixed-use community spaces? Claire's eyes widened. Like your artist community idea, exactly. The flagship hotel in Boston has an entire wing that's been closed for renovation. It could become affordable studios for artists, with gallery space on the ground floor. Lucas felt a spark of genuine enthusiasm as he outlined his vision. The Charleston property has beautiful gardens that could be open to the public. The Newport location would make an incredible library and cultural center. Lucas, that sounds amazing, Claire said, her expression radiant, but will your board approve it? What about the profit margins your father was so concerned about? Lucas smiled. That's the beauty of being CEO. I get to make the case for a new direction. And the numbers actually work. Community goodwill translates to brand loyalty for our luxury properties, not to mention tax benefits and local government support. He reached across the table and took her hand. You inspired this, you know. Me, how? You reminded me why I wanted to be in this business in the first place, to create spaces that matter, that bring people together, that preserve something worth saving. He squeezed her hand. I've been so focused on expansion that I forgot why the work mattered. Claire squeezed back. I'm glad. Though I'm not sure I deserve the credit. You ask the right questions, Lucas said simply. No one's done that in a very long time. In the weeks that followed, Lucas found himself looking forward to their morning coffee meetings before work, their evening dates exploring the city, and weekend adventures to nearby towns where Lucas would point out architectural details while Claire shared stories of the books she was editing. The Westbrook deal moved forward, but with significant modifications. Lucas presented his board with a comprehensive plan that balanced luxury accommodations with community-focused initiatives. To his surprise, the proposal was met with enthusiasm, particularly from younger board members who recognized the potential for positive press and community goodwill. Even his father, initially skeptical, grudgingly admitted that the revised approach positioned Montgomery real estate as an industry leader in socially responsible development. 1 month after their first meeting, Lucas took Claire to the Westbrook Hotel in Boston for the weekend. The acquisition was complete, and preliminary work on the artist studio conversion was already underway. I can't believe this is happening so quickly, Claire said as they toured the space, Lucas pointing out where galleries would be built and which rooms would become studios. When something feels right, why wait? Lucas replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. I haven't felt this connected to a project in years. Is that all you haven't felt connected to in years? Claire teased, leaning into him. Lucas looked down at her, still amazed by how easily she had become essential to his life. Definitely not all, he said, kissing her softly. That evening, over dinner at the hotel's rooftop restaurant, Lucas shared his newest idea. What if we incorporated a children's bookstore and reading room into the Newport property? We could host author events, reading programs for kids from underserved communities. Claire's face lit up. Lucas, that would be incredible. I could connect you with authors who would love to participate. Would you help design it? Lucas asked. You understand what makes a reading space special better than any architect I could hire. I'd love to, Claire said, her eyes shining, though I'm starting to think you're just finding excuses to keep me involved in your projects. Is it that obvious? Lucas laughed. I like having you in all parts of my life, Claire Goodwin. 6 months into their relationship, Lucas proposed in the reading room they had designed together at the Newport property. Claire said yes before he could finish asking, kissing him with such joy that the construction workers still finishing the space broke into spontaneous applause. Their wedding took place a year to the day after they first met, in the garden of the Charleston Hotel, which had been open to the public just as Lucas had envisioned. Claire wore a simple white dress with tiny flowers embroidered along the hem, and Lucas wore a suit but with jeans instead of dress pants, a private joke between them. In his vows, Lucas thanked Claire for the smile that had changed everything. You looked up from your book with such genuine happiness that I forgot about spreadsheets and acquisitions and bottom lines. You reminded me that real success isn't measured in dollars but in passion, purpose, and love. Claire's vows celebrated how Lucas had reconnected with his original vision. You took a chance on authenticity in a world that often rewards conformity. You remembered what mattered to you and had the courage to pursue it. And somehow, in the midst of transforming your company, you transformed my life too. 2 years after their wedding, Claire gave birth to their daughter, Lily, named after the librarian who had first inspired Claire's love of books. Lucas cut back his hours at Montgomery Real Estate, delegating more responsibilities so he could be present for his family. Together, they established the Montgomery Goodwin Foundation, which funded literacy programs and arts initiatives in communities where Montgomery Real Estate had development projects. The artist studio concept expanded to 3 additional properties, creating affordable living and working spaces for hundreds of creative professionals. 5 years after their coffee shop meeting, Lucas and Claire returned to brood awakening on their anniversary. The owner recognized them immediately. They had become regular customers. And Lucas had helped the woman purchase the building when the landlord threatened to raise the rent. As they sat at the same table by the window, 3-year-old Lily on Lucas's lap and Claire showing the slight curves of her second pregnancy, Lucas marveled at how completely his life had changed because of one spontaneous decision to sit at an occupied table. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "How differently today might have gone if I'd found an empty table that morning," Lucas said, taking her hand across the table. "Or if you hadn't smiled the way you did. Or if you hadn't asked what I was reading," Claire added. "So many little choices that led us here." Lucas looked at his wife, still captivated by her smile after all these years. "Best detour I ever took." Claire leaned across the table and kissed him softly. "Best coffee I ever ordered." Lily, not to be left out, insisted on clinking her hot chocolate against both their coffee cups in a toast. "To happy accidents," Lucas said, "and to asking the right questions," Claire added, her eyes full of love. Outside the window, the city continued its relentless pace. Lucas's phone occasionally buzzed with messages from work, but they no longer seemed urgent. The most important parts of his life were right here at this table: the woman whose smile had made him forget about a multi-million-dollar deal, the daughter who had his eyes and her mother's love of stories, and the promise of many more chapters still to be written together.